This is, my family had a couple of close encounters with Mr. Showmanship, Liberace, and this is about an evening one night when my brother Tom, who's 4 years older than I, took my mother, Pearl, who was 63 at the time, to a Las Vegas show starring Liberace.
Wow.
And they got a little tipsy and made a little scene. So besides being a snappy dresser, my brother Tom was a bit of a Falstaff, a traveling party with an ever-ready barrel of a laugh that turned heads in many a saloon. A few added pops of libation meant that he was guffawing at everything, even the serious stuff, especially the serious stuff. On that fateful night in the desert, Liberace was on stage in a blue spotlight, solemnly reciting words from Man of La Mancha, to dream the impossible dream, to be better far than you are, to bear with unbearable sorrow. And from stage right came a sudden, hilarious cackle, breaking the spell and filling the showroom audience with dismay. But the great Liberace didn't miss a note, even as more maniacal hack, hack, hack laughter caused nervous titters throughout. Mr. Showmanship, consummate professional, unreachable star, oozed onward to reach the unreachable star. Thunderous applause muffled any further distraction from stage right. It was the tradition of the star to come to the edge of the stage and offer those down front an envying look at an impressive array of diamonds adorning his fingers. My mother had been spending the evening single-handedly celebrating her 63rd birthday and the repeal of the 18th Amendment, now fueled by the turquoise nectar in her complimentary hurricane glass. She could no longer contain herself. She leaped up, elbowed her way through the other women who had come to worship at the shrine, took the holy man's hand, and kissed his candelabra ring. Oh my gosh, she copped a feel, was Liberace's masterful ad-lib through pearly teeth.
I like that very much. So your mother was very tempted to be starstruck, it seems.
Well, she was only for Liberace. Well, and maybe Gregory Peck. She had a thing for Gregory Peck, but she was like a lot of blue-haired ladies. She thought that he was a matinee idol, and God only knows what kinds of Freudian subcurrents could be read into this.
Yes,
but
yes.
As it turns out, I had the opportunity later on that same year. I was a young newsman in Colorado Springs. I had the opportunity to interview Liberace, and I at my mother's insistence, I had him sign a dozen 8.5 by 11 photos of her and Liberace all cuddled together. And that was going to be the name of this book. It was going to be, the title of one of the chapters was Stalking Mr. Showmanship, from which I just read.
And that didn't work out as a title in the long run?
Well, I contacted the Liberace Foundation almost as an afterthought and didn't hear anything from them for a long time, and went ahead with the publication. And then while I was away on vacation in Hawaii, I got a call from the head of the foundation who said, "Thou shalt not." So that's a trademark term. Even Mr. Showmanship has trademarks on it, and you may not promote your book in this way. So I had to call back that book, take it off the market, and come up with something new. And as it turns out, my father's corny catchphrases, there's so many of them, I had to create a glossary in the back of this book.
Yes, I've taken a look at the glossary. I've never heard of most of those phrases, actually. Are they common in Kansas City?
They were certainly common to him. He never met a cliche that he didn't like. May I read a few of them
yes,
to you?
Sure.
Okay, I'll try to be brief, but some of them are pretty funny. Melva Hess. Melva Hess, that's Huff's description of snarled traffic or tangled Christmas lights. Melva Hess. Cattywampus. Cattywampus means that last saw cut was slightly out of alignment. Anti-gogglin, on the other hand, means slightly cattywampus. Vuxide venomous means more than slightly anti-gogglin. And whomperjawed means wildly vuxide venomous. You got all that?
Yeah, so he really had his own personal vocabulary, didn't he? So when you look back on it then, he seems very typical to me in some ways of the men of that generation, sort of tight-jawed and very reserved in the kind of communication that you got from them, and not really discussing feelings in a lot of detail. Do you think that your emphasis on writing and being articulate and becoming a journalist is sort of a reaction to that? Or how did you and your father interact growing up?
We had a very complicated relationship, as a lot of boys do with their fathers. And I was the youngest and most sensitive, and it was very difficult to get through to him. A friend of mine who read this book pointed out to me, he said, you know, these phrases that he invariably used, what was he covering up? Why couldn't we ever get through to the inner vulnerable
that
man?
Is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, what was really going on underneath?
So I think probably, like a lot of people who come up with a certain equation in their family, you become what others are not, or you become interested in developing that side of you which you feel starved for. And I felt in many ways starved for his affection and attention, and especially touch. Those were, as I say, he was 42 when I was born. He came from a rural area. What he knew about raising a family probably came straight out of the barnyard. So we had to kind of fend for ourselves in a lot of ways.
And you describe in a couple of places in the book his techniques of physical discipline. He was willing to touch you in that way, I guess.
Oh yes,
more than others.
He could take off that big wide leather belt and let you know who was the boss. And I will say that the other members of I've enjoyed a protected status.
Really?
And in many ways.
Was that because of your mother, or because of how he saw you?
Mostly because of my mother. She was a buffer between my father and me. But also my brother Tom, who was closer in age to me than Ron, who was already out the door by the time I was aware of things. But Tom was often took on the role of family bad boy, whipping boy, if you will. And often he was, if we were both guilty of something, and Dad would wear himself out on Tom before it got to me.
Very fortunate.
Not
indeed.
very fortunate for Tom. He never got the respect he deserves.
I find that interesting. I had two sisters, and of course, so there were completely different rules of discipline.
Oh, I'll bet.
That, and being the oldest child, you feel often like the icebreaker. So it's nice that you were sort of able to follow in his wake and sort of see the consequences of stepping over certain lines.
Yeah, well, there are also certain drawbacks to being the designated good boy in the family, and nobody wants the mantle that they are handed in life. And so I spent a lot of my youth trying to be something I wasn't, which was a bad boy, which accounts for a couple of chapters in this book.
Yes, there's some very interesting adventures with alcohol and cigarettes and automobiels.
Yeah, I think you have a picture of me around the age, 16 there?
Well, let's go take a look.
Let's see, the one without the sleeves.
Let's find that one.
There was a night when we got into my dad's scotch, and we punished more of the bottle than we thought we were going to, my friend David, who lived up the street. And we had to replace the fluid in the container, and when we added water, it just got dimmer, and so we tried our hand with Mother's food coloring supply.
That sounds like an adventure right there.
We gave up when it turned a shimmering emerald green. We said, okay, we're cooked. By the time Mom and Dad get home, we will feel the backside of that belt I was talking about. But actually my brother Tom saved the day, and we concocted this story where he had borrowed the liquor from my dad's liquor cabinet, and that was something at least everybody was willing to believe, because Paul couldn't be a bad boy.